Alright, violations. This is yet another example of an episode that would be pretty easy to adapt to a TTRPG. There's actually a very simple plot hook, and the plot hook leads directly to a mystery that needs to be investigated by the players, and thus the players then have to learn about an alien race that has never been seen before. Good stuff. Really, actually genuinely thought this was one of the better episodes of TNG for a one-off. Another cool part about this episode is it goes into the idea that not all telepaths are the same. Let's see here if it was season 5. I don't remember which season it was. There was the season of TNG where they had an episode that had this Karn group where the Karn had as their gimmick the fact that because of the fact that Karn are born with the ability to communicate telepathically, they have no reason to need to learn to speak. So your average Karn, literally, before they started interacting with other races from other planets, the Karn didn't have a spoken language. Their telepathic abilities were their primary method of communication. Verbal speech was unnecessary. And that is something that made the Karn an interesting race concept. Well, what do they do with the Ullians that makes the Ullians interesting? The Ullians, while they have, generic, normal telepathic abilities overall, the Ullians are particularly skilled at literally reading your mind like an open book. Things that you halfway remember from things that happened years ago, the Ullians can rummage around in your mind and find it. And that is the core focus of what makes Ullian telepathy unique and interesting. And the Ullians have decided to go and make a telepathic data archive, recording the memories of various people's lives somehow. Don't ask me how that one works. And thus taking those memories and turning them into the equivalent of books in a library. Interesting idea. Definitely thought it was an interesting idea. Realistically, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, telepathy isn't real, so who cares? As a plot device, it is interesting because the fact that it means that Ullians are, to put it bluntly, super telepaths. Now, one thing that has been established about betazoids is that some betazoids have a stupid range for their telepathy. Like that one guy who got sent to meet Gumtu, his telepathy was so powerful he couldn't communicate with Gumtu over light years, but he could sense Gumtu's thoughts at a range of light years. Well, that's a betazoid. Ullians, apparently, I don't think Ullians can do that. Ullians are much like Vulcans in that they are up close and personal when they use their telepathy with someone. And they don't really seem to have... Well, Ullians are good at processing visual data when they're reading someone's memories, too. Because the whole process of sifting memories and finding half-forgotten memories gives you the visual component of those memories just as much as anything else. So, like, all the senses added together into the memories that the Ullians are sifting out. Now, one thing that's interesting about this is that the Ullians are actually capable of creating false memories. Like, when Jev here was trying to hide his crimes, which was, you know, stealing memories from people. Jev, his attempt to hide it was to create a false memory where Deanna Troi would think she remembered the other guy doing it instead. It's like she has a memory of the same incident, it's just distorted to be the wrong person. Oh, there's also a third one. This lady who's kind of there. They're like the main two. It's like, Tennian is simply the one who's the best at being a telepathic historian. His skill at memory retrieval is top-notch. This lady, they don't really talk about her enough to explain why she's here, but she looks like the whole, like, wise old mentor kind of person. Oh, I wonder if Eve Brenner did more than one role. Yes, she did. Oh, okay then. Who's the other one? Ah, one of the Inarans. Okay. From Voyager. Anyways, so these two guys. Now, one thing that's interesting here is that Ullian history. Ullian history is something quite significant and important to pay attention to and remember. Why? Well, you see, the whole telepathic memory invasion thing used to be a relatively common crime on Ullian. Yeah, that's a bit of an interesting wrinkle. Because it suggests that what Jev is doing is a skill any Ullian could learn, or most Ullians, perhaps. And thus not really a particularly unusual ability. Also, one thing that's not gone into in a whole lot of detail in this is how good would an Ullian be at taking an unwilling person and just, you know, it's like, yes, we want to know what you know, so please do not resist. Yeah, that sort of thing. To be quite honest, I would say that having an Ullian as a, shall we say, telepathic interrogator would work quite well, probably. See, one thing that people keep forgetting is that that's one of the things that Star Trek has done since the beginning with telepaths. Spock could do that. Like, using a mind meld to force someone to give him information that they were unwilling to contribute on their own. And it's not actually explained in much detail, but under normal circumstances, the process of memory retrieval is actually something that the target participates in. Because when Keiko O'Brien is talking to one of the Ullians trying to remember something that she'd forgotten, or half forgotten, I guess you could say, because she knows that something happened. She just doesn't remember how it happened. And she wanted the Ullian to help her remember that. Well, she was, actively participating in that. I think the reason why the whole memory invasion thing is akin to rape is that it kind of requires you to force someone to think about something they're not willing to think about, and this causes the individual considerable distress, shall we say. And the what's the best way to put this? The end result of this cultural revolution was the Ullian equivalent of the teachings of Sirach on Vulcan, where someone who is a glorious leader is like, hey, guys, we should do things this other way, which is better and good. And, oh yeah, this is another thing that's interesting, is that this talks about the whole like forced mind meld thing, but also I think there was the Riemann Viceroy in Star Trek Nemesis who used telepathy to do something vaguely similar to Troy. It's just that in Troy's case, it wasn't memories. It was more like a shared fantasy where Troy and Shinzon were simultaneously interacting in their imaginations. Yeah, that's another telepathy feat that you don't see in Star Trek very often, but in Judge Dredd, that is something that comes up relatively often when they have a telepath attempting to interrogate someone. The telepath will enter a state where the target has not necessarily is sure whether it's reality or not, and thus the telepath might trick them into doing something or saying something that they don't really they wouldn't do if they weren't confident about their position. And of course, the whole idea of, it's like, stop hitting yourself, when in reality it's all in your head, and thus you're not actually getting physically injured. However, psychological trauma, and in this particular case, some kind of neurological trauma. It's like the psychological distress is bad enough that it causes a neural issue. Yeah, it's not entirely clear exactly what happens, but the after effect is rather potent. The thing is, though, is that the Ullians, because of the fact that this is something that they have seen many, many examples of, because of the fact that, the majority of people on their planet have the ability to do this, they have seen many, many cases of this, so they know exactly how to treat it. Because, again, decades of experience. Anyway, though, so yes, like this sort of thing here is like Spock forcing Valeris to tell him who was trying to assassinate Gorkon and stuff like that. Having an Ullian do that is presumably workable. It's something that's considered, mean, and thus, not something you would want to do on a regular basis. And the whole telepathic rape thing is probably an indicative of how psychologically painful the process can be when the person who is on the receiving end tries to resist and fails. You know, it's like the equivalent of having someone beat you senseless uh, because they wanted to steal your couch. It's like, well, you try to prevent them from stealing your couch and you get left laying on the floor unconscious. Yeah, I think that's the analogy they were going for with this. And, you know, the fact that Troy was actually in a coma, for example. Yeah. So, the episode's plot was a really simple one. You have the Ullians doing their Ullian things for Ullian reasons. The actual plot hook was that they're actually ferrying the Ullians. The Ullians are on board the Enterprise because they're being taken to a new location where they can do more of their telepathic historical documentation thing. That's the entire reason why the Ullians are on board the ship. And then the Ullians do their telepathic historian thing on board the ship with certain members of the crew. And, you know, then you have the bad guy here do the thing on Troy. And then they have to figure out what happened to Troy. Which, you know, that's a plot hook. The actual, like, mechanics of the whole thing is, like, they had fun in this episode with looking at glimpses of people from the past because of the fact that the Ullians' abilities, they felt like it would be a fun idea to show the Ullians' abilities on several occasions. So you have multiple individuals doing things where they have a dream-like sequence where they relive something that happened years ago. And, oh yeah, also it says here that the practice has been unheard of for centuries. Yeah, I don't believe that. And that is, again, it's one of those things where having people treated as normal, obviously, no. It's been a heavily prosecuted crime for, you know, centuries. Because, again, the Ullians' Reformation movement, that's how long ago it happened. But the thing with it is that it's on the books. Everyone knows what it is. Even if it's something that the majority of Ullians would be unwilling to do, blah, 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 blah. In this story, we see one that does. Now, such behavior being highly prosecuted criminal behavior makes perfect sense. Now, that's the part where this gets interesting. Because, like, if you're not going to copy this story and simply use Ullians in a different story, that whole thing with Valeris and Spock comes to mind. Is that having an Ullian who is helping you and having the Ullian, you know, assist someone with remembering something that the person being assisted doesn't want to remember. That could actually be something that is considered a valid plot element in the story. Because, again, is that Spock's justification for doing it to Valeris is people are trying to destabilize the Federation, and we need to know who. So you're going to tell us because you actually know. And Valeris's mental discipline was not strong enough to prevent Spock from finding the information in her mind. she seemed highly upset about it too. It did not have the level of side effects that this particular thing had, which causes me to question just how long the invasive telepathy was actually being done when Troy was on the receiving end of it. It's like, it doesn't seem like the sort of thing where you'll knock someone into a coma by sifting through their memories for a minute or two. Seems like it's something that would be more lengthy of a process. I don't think they actually say in the episode exactly how long it took, and they don't actually give a whole lot of examples of it either. They mention that it has happened multiple times and that Jev has done it multiple times. And this is the part about this that gets screwball, is that, and again, I'm not talking about screwball in a bad way, but screwball in a way that makes it fun to play with. The memory tampering thing is also a factor of the forced intrusion aspect, because like I said, it's that in Troy's case, the forced intrusion caused her to remember the wrong person as being the cause of the forced intrusion. And in Crusher's case, the forced intrusion isn't something that she necessarily even knows is happening at first. And as things get farther along, it's like a dream you can't wake up from. So again, it's that it suggests that the whole the negative effects of the memory intrusion thing required it to be a relatively prolonged procedure, and not just like 5 minutes of exposure and then you're in a coma until you get very, very specific specialized medical treatment. I wouldn't go that far. No, I mean, unpleasant, sure, but yeah, hey, whatever. Anyway, though, so yeah, to wrap up, Ullians, very interesting race idea to tinker with in the story. Not exactly super aliens, but they do have an interesting ability. And with that, I will bid you farewell until next time.